to review bids for the North Bellbrook Drive culvert.
So moved.
In a second?
A second.
Okay, thank you.
A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to enter into a work session. And this was seconded by Dr. Van Veldhuizen. Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes. Thank you.
Are you passing the torch, Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
To the city manager, front and center.
Okay, so the first document that's in the packet is an updated estimate. The last time that we met was June 22nd. And at that meeting, LJB was still trying to determine final configuration of how the treatment of the, I think it's an 8-inch sewer line that runs underneath of the creek would be handled. And so the estimate that everyone saw at that meeting on the 22nd was $421,023. So like I said, after we were able to get the final engineer's estimate for that, which came in lower, which we thought it would. Basically what was presented to council was worst case scenario, or depending on how Greene County was going to respond for that 8-inch sewer line and what needed to go on top of it to protect it. So the final estimate came in at $406,047. So that was lower. So we put out to bid the project, and there were 10 bid packets that were picked up. And of those 10 bid packets, there were 6 that were returned to us. And so we held a bid opening. It was, let's see, I think it was either the 9th or the 10th. I cannot, it was the 9th. So it was 10 a.m. on the 9th. We did it in council chambers, and Ryan and I were there. Ryan opened the bids, and I recorded the name of the contractor and the amount, and did a preliminary scan just to make sure they appeared to be complete. And if anybody had indicated that they could finish the project sooner, then we asked that they included that. And there was only one that did include a earlier date than what was anticipated. So of the 6 bids, they ranged from the low bid of 300 and this is a bad one right here, of 316,000. I need to get my larger view here, so I apologize. Just bear with me. So the swing on the 6 of them was actually pretty broad. So it was 316 was the low and 433 was the high. So
Wow.
it was a pretty big swing on that. So I've got this pulled up now so that I can actually see it, which is a good thing. So Sturm Construction was a low bid at 316.42. And then the high bid was RB Juergens at 433,557. So out of the 6 bids, like I said, there was only one person that indicated that they could get it completed sooner, which was the one that was in the middle of the road, number 4, and they said that they could complete it in 70 days. However, we didn't determine that having the project finished sooner for an extra $80,000 was necessarily worthwhile. So what we did after we had opened up the bids was we sent everything over to our civil engineer, Dan Hoying at LJB, and he and his team took a look, because basically the bulk of these bids is the concrete structure, the concrete arch that's going to have to go in. And so they had given specifications for a concrete arch and wanted to make sure, obviously, that these were apples to apples estimates and bids on what exactly it is that we need. So thankfully, the Sturm Construction bid was adequate. They had done everything correctly. The structure that they were including and their estimate was sufficient for the bidded project. And so there's also a recommendation letter in there from LJB to recommend Sturm Construction for the completion of the project. So that's kind of where we are. I know that LJB did do reference checks. This construction company has installed these concrete culverts before. I think that the most recent one that they installed was for Tip City. So they have worked for municipalities before and have installed these types of structures. So recommendations checked out, and LJB found no issue with recommending this company to award the contract to. And I think, Ryan, didn't you talk to somebody that had good things to say about them as well?
Yeah, our salesman from EJP, he also price quoted 3 of the 6 construction companies, and he had nothing but good to say about Sturm Construction.
So
Are there,
that's the long and the short of it from my end.
so were there clearly defined evaluation factors communicated in the bid or a request for bid?
Yeah, I think that our bid documents were like 60 or 80 pages long. I can't remember now. It was massive. We had to put it in a 2-inch binder. So yes, there were very specific specifications in terms of what structure would go in because of the hydraulic analysis, and because we have to make sure that whatever goes in there is not going to cause any rise. So yes, there were specifications in there. And that's one of the things that we really needed LJB to evaluate the bids for, is because there are different companies that make these structures. There's 2 major local players in the game. And he needed to make sure that they were basing it off of one company's structure. And this actual contractor had reached out to both of the structure providers and had selected another one. So our engineer reached out to the other company to make sure that what they were estimating was the proper structure for this. So it's 2 vendors that are kind of like Coke and Pepsi.
Okay.
Melissa, what's the timeline for completion?
So timeline for completion, what we put out is it absolutely had to be done by October 31st.
Okay.
With the hope that people would be able to do it sooner, because this isn't a huge project, but people are, you know, hard to secure on short notice. So everybody but the one contractor, like I said, did not give a sooner date other than October 31st. And like I said, for $80,000, we could get it done sooner.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elaine. You're next.
I just thought, that is a huge swing. I'm having trouble grasping that huge a difference. What constitutes, the total, and I have 0 experience in hiring engineering companies, so I need help in explaining that.
I can say that when Ryan was sitting with me, when Dan, our engineer, was really waiting for us to call him as soon as we got the bids in. And when we told him what the low and the high was, he was not surprised at all. He said a 25% swing is what he would expect to see. I was surprised by it too, but apparently that's normal.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He was not alarmed by that like you and I. I thought it was a big swing too, but he said a 25% swing was not uncommon. So
okay.
I'm going by his experience on that one.
I do trust LJB, so.
Hey, if you look at the spreadsheet that you handed out, if you look at line 32, it looks like the big difference is in that concrete structure.
Yes.
I mean, it's almost $100,000 there. And I would guess that that's probably where this contract.
That's about the difference in the bid. So.
And we've used contact arches before, haven't we, Ryan?
Yeah, we've used them on Portage Path, and maybe the one on Barnett, but I'm not too sure on Barnett, but Portage Path definitely.
So obviously those are less expensive than what,
Hmm.
and plus the high bid was Juergens, and they're a huge company, you know,
Yeah.
one of their, a minute job for them that they'd want
So
to pay for.
From what Dan had told us, because we had pointed out that exact same thing, is that the swing was basically in the price of the structure. And he said that the price of the structure includes everything that it's going to require to get it in, all of the labor and everything like that, all of the manpower. And some of these contractors probably pay more than others, some of their schedules. You know, if they were aggressive in the pricing, you know, they might have had better availability. Some of them, you know,
Yeah.
have had a full summer already and not really worried about it. So if we want to pay them the extra money, then that's great. They'll take it. That was our take on it after, at least my take on it after talking to Dan.
Well, I'm okay with that low bid. I mean, the references checked out, and you know, I don't see speeding it up and spend an extra $80,000.
It's for those few weeks, that's a lot of money that we have to come up with outside the budget. So I don't think it's worth the
So
bonus to do it
speaking
faster.
of budget, unless anybody has anything that they would like to add related to the bids, I did want to touch on the funding memo that I had included. So is that okay to go ahead and touch on, or did anybody else have anything related to the bids?
What's the difference between the pre-tech and the contact?
They're both companies that make these structures, like I kind of inferred to in layman's terms. They're kind of like Coke and Pepsi from what I understand. So they do the same thing. LJB had just worked with Pre-Tech to understand the specifications that would be needed to meet their engineering needs. So Contact makes the same structures. So they might, and we do know that Sturm had reached out to Pre-Tech as well. So it sounds like they worked with both of these vendors for these structures and must have been able to get a better price out of Contact. But our engineer did evaluate the Contact structure that was quoted in this bid to make sure that it was sufficient to what we needed and what was in our engineering specifications.
Is there a history of them being cheaper? Contact?
I'm not sure. I don't know if Ryan has experience with that.
I don't know.
Did LJB have any experience with them, or was this the first time they've encountered them?
I think with Contact,
No, with Strom.
you know, I don't know. Most of the engineering references that they had were choice one on their reference sheet. So Dan didn't have personal experience with them, but I don't know if another engineer at LJB may have. It's a pretty big organization.
Yeah, and Ernie, historically, Belbrook has done pretty good. I think Ryan can back me up on this a little bit. The only time we really had a problem was the bridge by Dots.
Yeah, that was
a small contractor that came in, and it took a lot longer than what they anticipated. The product, the work was good, but it just took a heck of a lot longer. And there were a lot of delays that were allowed for in the contract that just seemed to all come to fruition.
Can we put any type of penalty clause in if they don't meet the deadlines or the estimated time, like a 10% fee?
I
For
believe
the
that
deadline?
was the bid, that there was penalty that was up in the bid. I'd have to look. Like I said, the bid packet was pretty extensive, and it's been several days since I looked at it. I know that I went through it from front to back, and I had updated all of it. So I do know that there was something in there about that. But yes, we could definitely include something like that in the contract.
That's the only thing I can think of that really backfire on us.
Yeah. Is there any other questions about the actual bids before we move on to funding?
Is there anything with regarding the special structure that one of the higher bidders could have come back and said that was an unfair request. We didn't know that that was an option.
It was in the bid that
Okay.
it said a pretext structure or similar. There
Okay.
was very specific language that they did not have to use a particular company for that. It just needed
Okay.
to be approved by the city in order to be able to put something else in other than the structure that we were going off of.
Okay. The only other number that I see, and it's not anywhere near significant as the main structure, is under mobilization. The estimate was 33.5 and Sturm came in at 8,320. What is mobilization?
That's for them to get all of their equipment on site. So
Okay.
it's their staging and everything like that. Is there anything else that's typically included in that, Ryan?
It could be the rental of whatever they're using as well.
Okay.
If they had to use like a crazy crane or something that they might not have access to.
Yeah, whereas they may have their own, so they don't have to rent it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so ready to move on to funding?
I think so.
Okay, I take silence as an affirmative. Okay, so I have turned over every rock, begged. I'm pretty sure that people feel sorry for me the number of times I've called just to make sure that nobody has anything for us. So having something like this occur during a pandemic is the absolute worst possible time for a number of reasons. So everybody that I talked to would say, well, did you try this agency? Did you try this agency? Did you try talking to this person? And so I have made so many phone calls and emails trying to find funding only to just continuously be turned back to Ohio Public Works Commission, who, in order to get a loan from them, they open those solicitations up called rounds, which the next one would be round 35. And that would be opened with their new budget. Well, they're uncertain if round 35 would even be funded at this point. They were doing their best to fund what was already committed to in round 34 from last year. So the good news is, and I have OPWC's website up on my computer all the time. I've told Linda Bailiff that the number of hits on their page per day is all probably me. So they have on their front page, it was last updated July 9th. I check it several times a day, like I said. And so on June 19th, let's see, that was the reappropriations, which would allow them just to continue to pay their bills after the July 1st fiscal year. And the House and the Senate passed 1 year's worth of appropriation for the commission's programs, fully funding round 35, which was the previous year. And also $3.5 million in emergency dollars on a first come, first served basis. What I was told by OWDA's director last Thursday or Friday, Ryan and I were on a conference call with them. They were the last agency that I had not touched base with regarding funding. And he said that the governor had 7 days to sign that bill, which would open up that $3.5 million in emergency funding. Linda Bailiff is the director of Ohio Public Works Commission. I have talked to her several times, and she knows that we are 100% fully ready. I already have our preliminary application ready. It's already zipped together. It's got current figures in it with the bid as of Thursday. And the minute that this website changes and that the emergency funding is open, if we're not one of the first ones in the gate, then I'm going to be shocked. I even checked this thing at night just to see if they slid it in on me. Because it's really the only basket that we have right now, because there are no loans out there. All of the loan programs would take at least a year to go through. Since we've already come so far in the process, there's unless we just want to put the brakes on everything to be able to get a loan, we're kind of stuck front loading it and really hoping that we're one of the first ones in the gate with the emergency funding, which I'm very hopeful for, because like I said, we're fully ready for this. We already have a contractor. This would be really easy for them to guarantee that they would be able to put their money towards a project that's absolutely going to get finished. So I know that that's not great news, but I mean, it kind of is what it is. The other real upset that came last week is Ryan and I were talking about this after we got told no for the 10th time, it felt like, related to funding, was that we thought that this was a permissive tax street. We found out when Ryan said, I think Bellevue's on the permissive tax list. And I was like, you know what? I think it is too. So we looked and it was on our list of permissive tax streets. Well, I said, you know what? Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let me reach out to the Greene County engineer, who is the one that creates the permissive tax map. So we found out that in 2018, our list went from like 13 streets down to 5. Bellevue was one of them. And we didn't know it. So the way that this was supposed to work, I checked ORC and everything on this. The way that this is supposed to work is the engineer sets the map, and basically how a road gets set as a permissive tax street is it needs to be kind of a main artery through the county that helps people travel through countywide, which makes really sense that a road like Clarkston or Tarryton would not be a permissive tax street any longer. So the only permissive tax streets we have right now are Franklin Street, Little Sugar Creek, Main Street, Upper Bellbrook, Waynesville Road, that whole string there, Washington Mill Road, and Wilmington Dayton. That's it. So we were really sad to see that Bellevue was not one of them on the list. So the thought is that the general fund go ahead and fund this kind of a project, or fund this project specifically, and that we hope that we get this emergency funding. That's all I've got. Unless we want to hold up and try to dig a little further for a loan somewhere, somehow.
Melissa, would the Ohio Public Works possibly be a 0% loan like we got for the water plant?
It could be a 0% loan, but the funding for this year isn't there. They just got approved to fund round 34, which was last year's loans that got approved. So OPWC loans, it might not be until next year that we would even be able to get it because of their funding situation. So I contacted Ohio Public Works, Ohio Emergency Management Agency, Department of Public Safety State Disaster Relief Program, USDA Rural Development, Ohio Water Development Authority, and the Developmental Services Agency, which is kind of like a CDBG grant funding organization. So with that rain event, we were one of the only ones in Greene County that had the kind of damage that we did. So there were a lot of factors that made us ineligible for a lot of programs. But everybody that I talked to couldn't help. So emergency funding is but the good thing is that we're ready for it. And like I said, it's first come, first served. And I checked this thing enough that this page might be live for maybe an hour before I notice it, and I've got our application in. So I
think it makes sense to just go ahead and fund it out of the general fund and hope that we get the emergency money. I mean, we can't forget that we may have a much larger expense, a Little Sugar Creek someplace too. So, I mean, that could be millions of dollars as opposed to 314 or whatever. Just my thoughts.
Sometimes it's easier to get lots of money than a little bit of money.
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, not that $300,000 isn't a lot of money to Bellbrook. I know it is, but it could have been a lot worse.
To the money people, that's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm hoping is that, when they go to report out on the number of projects that they were able to fully fund or fund to completion, that ours could be an easy one on their list. So I'm really hopeful. And I know when I talked to the director at OWDA on Friday, he said, I'm actually going to talk to Linda here this afternoon and I'll tell her I talked to you. And I said, she knows I've talked to everybody at this point and her several times. So it's not for a lack of trying.
Yeah.
Is reimbursement an option with Ohio Public Works?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's our best bet to fund ourselves and hopefully apply for public works money. And if we get that, refund and move on. Otherwise, that's $300,000 out of our budget that we'll probably never find, never return.
So on tonight's regular council meeting, there is a resolution that would award the contract to Sturm. And what LJB had recommended is that we pass a resolution for the contract to go to Sturm, and then also to go ahead, just for the sake of timeliness, go ahead and authorize the contract along with a 10% contingency above the bid with a not to exceed amount. And I know that we went ahead and pre-prepared a resolution just in case. So if council is okay with that structure of a resolution with a 10% contingency built in, then we can go ahead and get this prepared and to the council person that's going to be reading this tonight.
I'm
And
okay
then-
with it.
Okay, and then on the other side of that, we've got our supplemental appropriations that we have to put on tonight for two different reasons. One of them is to authorize the spending of the CARES Act money and the newly created fund that was done at the last meeting, and then authorize the transfer of the funds from the general fund into the capital improvement fund for the completion of this project. So when you look at the supplemental appropriations, you have to take into consideration that the amounts are doubled because it shows it being expensed out of the general fund as a transfer out. And it also shows it being expensed out of the capital improvement fund as completing the project. So that number is really big. And I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that it's basically that amount for the project is stated twice.
So with the revisions that I see on, it's page 15 of the agenda for tonight, the total appropriations for the general fund, what does that do to the total balance for the general fund?
I can get that spreadsheet up so that when we get to that ordinance, I can give you that amount.
Okay.
I just wanted everybody to know that we kind of planned ahead with this and went ahead and accounted for the supplemental appropriation for this project to be able to get it moving, because we'll also have to have a public hearing at the next meeting as well. So
Is there any wording in the original bid package that there would be a 10% contingency?
no, we're just preparing ourselves for that.
But are we telling them that with this approval? Okay.
This just means that if, let's say that they get in there and something's going to cost a little bit more than what they thought it was, because we've all hired contractors to do other things, and the minute that they open something up, there could be a surprise there. If that would take it over the amount that you guys are authorizing with this resolution, I'd have to come back to you guys for a change order, and that could delay us a couple weeks depending on when that might occur. So this is just trying to be proactive and authorizing a 10% contingency. Now, if there are any change orders, I'll absolutely pass that along to council. And this isn't just going to be a blanket, we're going to spend that 10%. This is just, if it's necessary, I have the authorization to be able to do that so that I don't have to be slowed up by having to come back if there's, $1,000 change order for some pipe or something. It's just trying to be proactive and timely.
Okay. Thank you.
Pam, I just have to ask quick, Pam. My screen shows this streaming live to YouTube.
It is.
The executives.
No, this was not this part of the meeting was a work session, which is an open meeting. executive session that will be having later is not open.
Okay.
So with that being said, it's now 7:01. Can we adjourn the work session? Have a motion
I'll make a motion to adjourn the work session.
in a second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Motion was made by Mr. Edwards to adjourn from the work session. This was seconded by Mr. Havens. Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
He's on mute.
you're on mute.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mayor Schweller.
Yes. At this time, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of Bellbrook City Council, July 13th, 2020. If you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to
The
the
flag of the
United
States
States of America and to the republic
Republic,
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Pam, if you could call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Hoke,
Here.
Mr. Havens,
Here.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Here.
Mr. Greenwood,
Here.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Here.
Mr. Edwards,
Here.
Mayor Schweller.
Here. Next item up is the approval of minutes of June the 22nd, our last meeting. Does any member of council have any corrections or additions to the minutes of the last meeting?
None, Mayor.
There.
on there.
Done.
Seeing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. Next item, mayor's announcements. I have none for this evening. We have no public hearings this evening, but we do have an introduction of ordinance number 2020-5.
Thank you, Mayor. Ordinance number 2020-5. An ordinance amending ordinance 2019-21 to adjust the City of Bellbrook appropriations for 2020. Whereas the City of Bellbrook adopted the 2020 annual budget based on the best information available at the time, and whereas additional costs have or will occur in some line items which requires the amendment of various appropriation levels. Now, therefore, the City of Bellbrook hereby ordains that the 2020 appropriation levels in several of the funds listed below be amended as follows. And it's a fairly good list. I'll let Melissa hit the highlights on it. Section 2, the ordinance shall take effect and be enforced from and after the earliest period provided by law.
Okay, ready for me?
Ready.
Okay, so what I include with the ordinance is a supplemental appropriation worksheet. It divides out by each fund and highlights each of the changes that are being made so that council can see exactly what's being done. I went through, even though there were two main reasons for this ordinance tonight. One of them is to be able to expend the CARES Act funds that we did not anticipate even receiving when we passed this budget in November of last year. So that is allowing us to spend that $120,616. And then the other large expense is transferring out the money for the North Bellevue project to be able to go into the capital improvement fund, and then also expending out of the capital improvement fund, which that transfer out as well as the expenditure to complete the project are really the main drivers, along with that CARES Act money to that whole balance. But I went ahead, since it's mid-year, and I went through every single fund and I made some minor adjustments to different things, just because they were helpful at where we are this year. So I did I did have a total supplemental appropriation of $888,852. And to TJ's question earlier, what this is going to do to the general fund balance is our beginning balance with our general fund when we came into 2020 was $1,616,865. So at the end of 2020, now this is estimated at mid-year with the revenues that we've received and we hope to receive, along with the expenses thus far, and taking those into consideration as hopefully an equal second half of the year, that would put us at a deficit of $135,956. However, that would still leave us with a fund balance of $1,480,909, sorry. So that deficit of $135,956, that's a very small deficit. And by the end of the year, that could very well even out, because the budget, the way that I budget is fairly conservative. So I try to understate revenues just a little bit and overstate expenses a little bit, so that it's kind of a worst case scenario picture when we look at the budget. So that 135,000 right now that we're looking at as a projected deficit, I'm not inclined to see that happen. It should be a smaller number. So that the general fund is really the one that's taken the hit on this, just because that's the fund that's going to have to pay for the repair for North Belleville.
Thank you.
Any other discussion with regards to ordinance 2020-5?
For the coronavirus relief funds, could you just clarify what those funds can be used for?
So this has been a struggle, and I don't know if anybody saw the Dayton Daily News, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday previous. It was on the front page how municipalities are really having a difficult time trying to spend the money. There are others in the county that got $1 million plus. And so this is not allowed to be a revenue replacement. It would be a whole lot easier if this could have helped local governments in that way, because it's very easy to justify. It's very easy to be able to demonstrate as well. But unfortunately, the most obvious thing that everybody could have used the money for on the local government level, we are unable to do that. So I have been meeting with the department heads and staff, trying to figure out the expenses that we are able to earmark to those funds or as reimbursements. And it's been a challenge. So there are some technology needs that we had, which have been minor, that have helped us be able to facilitate these kinds of things that we weren't fully equipped for, as well as remote work things. So there's some, you can spend it on some technology purchases. Of course, you can spend it on PPE. But we're not going to spend $120,000 in PPE, because you're also, on the flip side of it, you're not allowed to stockpile anything. So you can't plan for the future with any of these funds. You have to use them only to address the current pandemic in the here and now. We have until October, I believe it's the 15th. There's the 15th and the 28th are the two dates out there. And I think we have until the 15th to encumber the money. And any money not encumbered by that point, we have to give back to the county. So this is a very long answer to a very short question, I realize, but it's complicated. So we are able to assist families and individuals in need. And I do have this in my city manager report, because I would like to discuss this with council. Our staff is not equipped to be able to, in this short period of time, with everything that we have going on right now, to be able to create, administer, and really work a solid grant program for businesses or individuals. That would be really hard given our small staff. So Greene County has taken the small business piece of it. So they are going to be, they have a $500,000 that they can give out to anybody that is 50 employees or fewer. And that program is running through their Department of Development. So, and that's only, the CARES Act only allows that money to go towards businesses that were closed either by order or by choice due to the pandemic. So the county is going to be able to take care of the business end of it. So there's this individual need that's an ability for us to be able to help. So I had the opportunity to meet the new executive director of the Family Resource Center last week and be able to go through it and see kind of what changes they've made since they've had their changes in leadership. And it got me thinking, they've got a really incredible operation over there. And I would strongly encourage any member of council that, you know, has not been over there since they've had their changes to go over there and see the work that they do. It was really, I mean, it was really humbling to see such a wonderful organization within our community that really is serving those in need in Bellbrook. So it got me thinking that they know who are in need, and they have a really good understanding of those that have been directly affected either by job loss or other financial ramifications as a result of the pandemic. So what I would like to possibly do is allow them to write a proposal to the city and outline how they could possibly utilize funds to pass on directly to those in need that were affected by the pandemic. I mean, obviously they would have to be very clear on what that money could be used for. It would have to be in line with the guidelines of the CARES Act, but that's one thought that I had. There's no way that we could spend $120,000 because we're going to have to justify every dollar that we spend, and it's going to be audited. So, you know, Wi-Fi for the entire downtown, could we do it? Yeah, we could do that. But, you know, is that really the right use of that money? I'm having a hard time with it. I mean, I met with the fire department, the police department, their needs are very minimal. Police department's getting some flash drives. I bought a few iPads. I mean, that's pretty much it.
I love the idea of working with Family Resource Center. They are an awesome organization.
So do I as well. In response to TJ's question also, there's a handbook, I think it's posted online, about 10 or 12 pages about how you can spend this money.
Okay.
So it's out there. So they've got a lot of stuff, and I've not looked through the entire thing in detail, but there's a lot of detail out there about what you can and cannot use it for. So.
Okay.
And I think that I might have attached that to our last packet, or maybe I linked it. It's the Office of Budget Management from the state, and they've actually changed it because I don't believe that I saw that clause where it could be used for families and individuals in there the first iteration, because I went through the whole thing front to back with all of the department directors, and I did not catch that before. So it might have been a new addition. And I know that they make changes as questions and, you know, people need better understanding of what they could spend it on.
Maybe find the most current revision and send it out to everybody in council so we can look at it in advance for our next thing. But a lot of this legislation, including the PPP Act, has been a series of questions and answers. And the guidance on PPP Act when it first came out was probably 3 pages. Now it's, I think it's, I don't know, probably 30 pages. They just keep adding more stuff on.
There's one other organization in town that I don't know if it falls into these guidelines since I haven't seen them, but it's called the Open Arms Clinic, that works with people who either are uninsured or underinsured. And if they have expenses that would be covered by, under those guidelines, that would be one other local organization that goes directly to the individual.
It's a good idea, Elaine. I did know about them, but I did not even think about it. That's a good idea. So what I could do, what I was gonna do is I was gonna ask the Family Resource Center to put a proposal together to demonstrate how they could use the money and how much money they could use, because they're gonna have to justify everything that they spend too. So it's gonna have to be a very transparent process throughout the whole thing. So I can ask them to work on a proposal if that's something that council is supportive of.
I love it.
Yeah, I support it, definitely.
I'm all in.
Would there
Support.
be any need for future training that fire or police would want to address issues such as a pandemic like this?
The thing about it is that nobody's offering trainings right now. So
Okay.
it's such a catch-22 with so much of this stuff, you know? I mean,
We have to spend it by what, December 31st, did you say, or is that October?
well, you have to encumber it by October 15th. So you've got to have your purchase order in for exactly what you're spending it for, and you've got to give it back on the 28th of October to the county, anything that you haven't encumbered. But the money that you encumbered, you have until December 30th, I think, to spend, and then it starts all rolling back up again.
This is such a unique situation that nobody knows. They're learning day by day, and it just puts us all behind the 8 ball.
What's difficult is we need $300,000 for a bridge, and we can't spend $120,000 in CARES Act money.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Are there any events upcoming that might have expenses that without the incurred expense, the event would be canceled? I'm not talking social or anything like that, but any kind of event where it would need some assistance in terms of buying equipment or just monitoring, temperature monitoring, anything like that.
Yeah, the Sugar Maple Festival and the Lions Club are trying to pull together an upcoming event. I know that they're just talked with the soccer club today. There's 2 very large tournaments coming to town that we're talking 10 to 20,000 folks in September and October. They're asking for to make the businesses in the town aware of their presence and be able to capture some of the business for the community. We may be able to help with that as well, with extra PPE equipment, masks, things like that, even for some of the local businesses.
And
Could we
Green
give them a
County
grant?
Emergency Management has been really great about that. I'll definitely send everybody the guidance. I have that note written down because I think that once you look at it, you really do realize just how difficult it can be to try to identify ways to spend the money. I mean, we've been thinking about this. We thought we were getting $80,000, and when we found out we were getting $120,000, we were like, well, let's sharpen our pencils. And I mean, it's difficult. I mean, we've all had, every department's has had eyes on this thing, and it's been difficult. But I mean, we're obviously open to ideas. I mean, if you guys come up with an idea and take a look at that guidance and you think it fits, like, let's go for it.
Well, so I think we had to look at it, but I think if we could do some masks or something like that to some of our downtown businesses, that might be greatly appreciated. I think it'd be great to support them in that manner.
I know that-
But we'd have some extra on the fire truck that we could, allocate out to those folks from time to time, especially when big events come in town. So those who don't have a mask with them may choose to wear one inside the store.
Yep.
Okay.
Any more discussion on ordinance 2020-5? Very nice. We have a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 2020-5.
Thank you, Forrest. A second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Elaine.
All right. Mr. Greenwood made a motion to introduce ordinance 2020-5, an ordinance amending ordinance 2019-21 to adjust the City of Bellbrook appropriations for 2020. This was seconded by Mrs. Middlestetter. Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes.
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Schweller.
Yes. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is Resolution 2020-0. It looks like a Nick Edwards one to me.
He's on
You're
mute.
muted, Nick.
There we go. Sorry. Resolution number 2020-0, resolution accepting a bid submitted by Stuck Construction. Is that who it is?
Sturm.
Sturm Construction for the North Bellevue Culvert Replacement Project, and to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract in connection therewith. Whereas the city of Bellbrook advertised for bidders for the North Bellevue Road Culvert Replacement Project according to specifications prepared by the city engineer, and whereas Stuck was the lowest and best bidder for the project. Now the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves that the bid submitted by Stuck for the North, excuse me,
S-T-U-R-M, Sturm.
Sturm
Sorry.
for the is with a bid price of 300. Someone give me that amount. I lost it in my paperwork here.
316.42.
316.42 is hereby accepted. Section 2, that the city manager is hereby authorized to do all things necessary to execute a contract with Sturm as stated above. That section 3, that the city manager hereby authorized to also expend funds for the full contract amount, along with a 10% contingency amount not to exceed.
That would be,
600.
thanks, Melissa.
Yeah, I didn't know who was going to get it.
Okay, what was the amount again?
347,600.
347,600. Section 4, that this resolution shall take effect and be forthwith.
Thank you, Nick. Any more discussion in council about this bid? Melissa, you want to give some background since we talked about it in our work session?
Yes, so what we did was the last council meeting, we had a presentation by LJB who presented the design solution for the repair of the North Bellevue Culvert. So this is a 28-foot concrete span, which is going to replace the twin 72-inch pipes that were corrugated metal that blew out with the rains that occurred on March 20th. So this span is also going to include the road is going to be a bit wider. There's going to be more gradual slopes on both sides so that the ability to include sidewalks would be able to happen should we decide to do that at some point. There's not currently sidewalks in that neighborhood, but that could at least allow us to add sidewalks to allow folks to safely cross. So the design was presented by LJB, and council went ahead and authorized the project to be put out to bid. Project was put out to bid, advertised in the Dayton Daily News on 2 occasions, and the bids were opened and due the morning of Thursday, July 9th at 10 a.m. 10 people picked up bids, 6 people returned them. The low bid was $316,000 and some change, which was Sturm Construction, and the company that LJB also reviewed the bid for and the estimate for, and recommended that we select as our contractor for the project. I think that covers all of the bases.
This was the subject of our work session before the meeting started officially. Does anyone have any additional comments or discussion from council? Seeing none, can we have a motion to adopt resolution 2020-0?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-0.
Thanks, Nick. Can I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ernie.
A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to adopt resolution 2020-0, a resolution accepting the bid submitted by Sturm Construction for the North Bellevue Drive Culvert Replacement Project, and to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract in connection therewith. This was seconded by Mr. Havens. Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Hope,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
yes,
Mayor Edward, or Mayor Schweller.
Yes. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is the city manager report.
you're muted, Melissa.
Sorry. So a lot of this stuff we've already covered ground on. I will hit some of the highlights though, just for reiteration. The CARES Act distribution that we received from Greene County, which was money from the federal level to the state level to the county level to us smaller folks here at the municipal level. On June 30th, we received $120,616.28. So we just had much discussion about that just previously. So I was going to talk about this, but we'd already knocked it out of the way. I would like to consider possible grant options for the Family Resource Center, and then open to ideas for other ways that we could help the community. No surprise here, but Be Well Bellbrook event has been canceled, along with pretty much every other event for the rest of the year, it seems like. Super sad, but it's the right thing to do. The Lions Club Festival was set for the very next weekend, and they had canceled quite some time ago, so it was absolutely the right call. The Brook Mills race is not happening in person, but they do still plan to do it virtually. So you would still be able to register and get a bib and a medal and all of that kind of stuff. So that is still happening, but just virtually. And we're gonna definitely bring both events back next year. Hopefully everything is a much different situation than what it is currently. Each year, our insurance pool, Maverma, gives out awards for claims less than $100 per employee and zero loss awards for particular departments that did not have any claims. So Bellbrook has been on a hot streak of being the overall winner, and we were again in 2019. We had the lowest claims per employee, which were $16.97 per employee, which is amazing. We were way lower than anybody else. And then Fire, Water, and Streets Department each received zero loss awards. So they all have plaques and little buttons with the year that they won the award. So they are winners for zero loss, which is great. So no insurance claims from those departments. And the city is still seeking, well, actually the Parks District on behalf of the city is seeking interested residents to serve as a Parks Commissioner. There is an application and information on the Parks District website. It's linked right from our homepage as well. And you do have to reside inside Bellbrook proper in order to be considered for that position. I am not sure how long that application period is going to be open, but I do know that the current term expiration is September 30th, so it will be here before we know it. We've had 3 city e-newsletters go out so far. They've had a really good read rate, so that's good. It's a great way for us to be able to push out information very quickly to folks, straight to their inbox. And it's a very low cost communication tool. So we've been using it, and people are opening them up and reading them and clicking on links and things and getting information from those. So I'm thrilled with that. Very last thing that we have is we had a Beachwood Drive culvert relining, and I think that this is very timely and interesting for everybody. I have some before and after pictures that were in the packet. So this was a man, I had a better description of this in here. I thought Ryan had given me a full description of what they did, and I clearly forgot some of the details in here. So long story short is this culvert was corrugated metal, much like the one that was blown out there at North Bellevue Drive. So as you can see from the before pictures, there's some wear, there's some rust, and it was starting to get in some pretty bad shape. So in order to reinforce it, what they do is they take wire mesh, they line the whole thing, and they spray concrete in it. So it reinforces the whole thing. It allows water to flow much easier, and it prevents any sort of further damage due to the deterioration of that galvanized metal that was starting to deteriorate pretty good. So this is a practice that the city has been using on some of our damaged culverts, and it's been pretty successful. And I know that there is another one that's on the radar that's gonna likely get fixed next year too. So I just thought that this was very interesting to see what a difference concrete can make and how you can reinforce something that is an older deteriorated metal structure, which is interesting. So that's all that I have.
Melissa, how long does it normally take for those culverts to get in that condition?
Ooh, that's
there-
I'm not sure. I'm not sure certain of that one. I don't know when that one was installed. I'm not really sure.
It doesn't matter.
That neighborhood was, that's right around the corner from me. And that neighborhood was built in the late 50s, early 60s. So I would guesstimate that that culvert was installed when these homes were built.
Okay, that's been a long time.
And
In
just
contrast, there's one on Streamview Court, was put in 20, 25 years ago, and it looks just as bad. So I'm not sure how long it would last, but I definitely think it may vary from bridge to bridge,
Yeah.
culvert to culvert.
Any
so
more
that was
questions?
my report.
Any questions for the city manager? Thank you, Melissa. Elaine, did you have one or?
No, I just said thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks, Melissa. Now, old business, we have nothing. Does anyone have any new business? This brings us to committee reports. Start off with safety.
Nothing specific from me, just monitoring crime reports. It's a couple weeks old, but just to maintain vigilance with regard to fraud. There is an announcement through U.S. Department of Health and Human Services with regard to COVID-19 fraud. Be on the lookout or protective of any personal information, specifically Medicare and Medicaid recipients. Do not respond to any unsolicited requests for information. That's all I have.
Thank you, TJ.
Mhm.
Service.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got a few words. Spoke with Ryan earlier today, and we all know it's been hot and dry. And on a normal day, excuse me, the water department will pump about 650,000 gallons. And here recently, we've been going up to about 1,300,000, almost double. City likes to pump water. It's breaking records, and everything's humming along, doing well. So, and I just remind residents, if they do use a lot of irrigation, that they can have a irrigation meter installed, and then that allows you to not have to encumber the sewer end of the water bill. So, and that's all I got.
Thank you, Forrest. Finance and audit.
Thanks, Mayor. The audit is complete and we're in the process of setting up a meeting with our audit to review the audit. The first week of August, I believe, were the dates that were thrown out there. I don't know whether that's been firmed up yet or not. And that would be the finance committee, I believe, that would meet. Is that correct, Melissa? Is that the week?
Yes, correct. That's the week. And I think that I was still waiting to hear from 2 finance committee members before we did that. So the possible dates were the 6th and the 13th of August.
Okay,
But once I hear from the other 2, then we'll get that scheduled.
sounds good. That's all I have, Mayor.
Is that something of a record to have that meeting in August?
I think so.
Kind of is. I mean, I think since we've moved away from the state audit, it's gotten a lot easier and it's moved along a lot quicker. Typically, we meet like in October. Usually the leaves have changed.
That's
when
what
we
I
do our,
thought.
meeting.
We almost forget those old days, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. Community Affairs, Elaine.
I don't have anything this month or this week.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to open discussion of council. TJ?
I did just have two things I wanted to bring up. I know there's a number of priorities that the city staff is facing, but we have spoken in the past about the CIC. When certainly North Bellevue is resolved and union negotiations are behind, if we can revisit that, I would appreciate it. And then, well, first off, is there any other comments with regarding CIC at this time?
You know, it's been some discussion with regards of the CIC, but what is our sense of urgency? What do you see happen with the CIC when it first gets moving? And we don't have to get into a lot of detail, but I was just curious on your perspective.
Yeah, I've seen a number of cities that have implemented that effectively. And I just wanted, when we spoke last about it, it didn't look like it would take too much in terms of time to get it established. I thought the estimate was just a couple of meetings. And then if it would alleviate any burden on city staff to streamline or make more effective the process of downtown redevelopment, it might be a worthy endeavor if it would make things simpler.
Okay. Thanks.
So in terms of priority, yeah, there are more daunting tasks in front of staff at this time. I understand. I just didn't want to lose focus.
Okay, good.
Would
Thanks.
like to add to that. I agree. I think it's an important factor. And as far as urgency, the economy's in great shape right now. Businesses are making moves. There has, I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of as soon as possible to get those buildings opened up and turned over to businesses, and a great opportunity for us to, capture a high dollar for those and be able to get facilities transplanted for our service department and fire department, while real estate's at a premium.
Okay.
Thanks, sir. Anything else, TJ?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring to light one other thing. On June 27th, I received an email from actually a resident of Bellbrook, a teenager, in his email, as he described it, named Justin Eason. I apologize if I mispronounced that wrong. And he just was asking, as a council member, what he could be doing personally to combat any risks from the COVID. I first predicated my email by stating I am by no means an infectious disease expert. I referred him to the CDC website, Johns Hopkins University, as well as the National Institute of Health for authoritative references. But then I just described some things that I do to build in habits in my everyday that make protection a little easier. But I just wanted to commend him, a teenager, reaching out to understand what can be done at a city level. So kudos to Justin.
Very good.
Here, here.
Anything else, TJ?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Forrest?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Thank you. Ernie?
I would just like to encourage anybody that lives in the city to apply to be a Parks Commissioner, to represent the city, and as far as the needs of the city for parks, facilities, and recreation. It's an important role that we definitely need someone to step up for, and I hope we get a lot of applicants, and see the website to apply. And definitely echo TJ and taking the CIC activity seriously. I'd like to see that get moved up on our priority list in any way possible.
So, thank you, Ernie. Elaine?
I'll just go along with Ernie on the Parks District person. We really need somebody who has a love for the nature. We have an awesome parks system here, and our recreation facilities could use a little help. And we just would like to have a voice. Bellbrook has a opening on that board, and so that we can have a voice. And I would double the request that folks look into that.
Thank you, Elaine. Dr. Dave,
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Edwards,
And I don't have anything tonight either, Mayor. Thank you.
thank you, Nick. I just want to again congratulate those departments that had 0 loss awards. I think they were the fire, the water, and street department. And that's something that takes training. That's something that doesn't happen by accident. I think it's something they work hard toward, and I think they should be commended for their services and keep us on the lowest end possible of the losses. So very pleased with that, and thanks for your great efforts. And Melissa, make sure you commend staff again for us. I know they got plaques and everything, but obviously if I see them in person, I'll say something as well. Any more discussion amongst city council this evening? At this point, we're going to adjourn our general session, and we will go to an executive session for the purpose of reviewing negotiations of 2 collective bargaining units. At the conclusion of our executive session, there will be no more news or no more announcements for the general viewing audience. So for those out there watching the meeting tonight, this will be the end of your meeting. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you. Can I have a motion for executive session, please?
I'll move
Make a
to
motion.
move to executive session.
Can I have a second, please?
I'll
Second.
second.
A motion was made by Mrs. Middlestetter to enter into executive session. This was seconded by Mr. Greenwood. Mrs. Middlestetter? You're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes, thank you. Babe, could you confirm that we're now no longer on YouTube streaming live?
Give me